Here's a fun talk for you guys. Game manipulation for fun and profit. And I'm seeing from Flashbots. So we mainly do Ethereum, things related to MEV and auctions. But okay, so let's start with a simple fable. I will tell you a very simple fable. So back in, I guess, 2018, 2019, Virgil, who later went on to, well, North Korea. But like at that time, he published this very influential blog post called "The Ethereum is a game technology," literally, which basically argues that the best use case for Ethereum or stateful blockchains is to take an existing game and then sort of say warp the incentives of this existing game by deploying side contracts or commitments that make people play the game differently, right? So you can kind of see it as the graph over here. Basically, you take a game, an existing game, here, say like game 1, and then you use Ethereum to warp it into a new game, game 2. So what specifically does this mean? Okay, so then let's say, we here have a guy. This is Kim. Kim has a box. This box allows Kim, this guy, to delegate arbitrary actions. And it is common knowledge that this box executes things faithfully. Now, Kim wants to use this box to improve the efficiency of the game that he's playing with his frenemy, Don. Okay, now, suppose they're playing this real simple game. Prisoner's Dilemma, I'm sure you guys are all super familiar with, right? So you basically have like corporate and defect to operations. You can draw them in a matrix. Now, one strategy that Kim could play is that Kim would want to delegate the box prior to the game begins. For example, Kim can say, if Don commits to corporate, then I will commit to corporate. If Don doesn't, then I commit to defect. It's kind of like similar to hiring a lawyer or an attorney to represent your legal rights and never deviate. So upon publishing this contract or delegating Kim's actions to this box, now the box makes the game work, right? So you can see basically after Kim publishes the contract, makes the delegation, Don's optimal move is essentially to also commit to corporate. You can draw them, of course, in this like tree structure. So in this case, we could see, in this very simple game, which is Princess Dilemma, you could warp the incentives of this game using Ethereum to another game, which is Prisoner's Dilemma, but with welfare maximization. But however, the game has some incentive issues. So here is where things get really interesting because it shows that commitments not only is this simple incentive warping, but there are more complex schemes given to it, right? So Kim wouldn't be so benevolent, surely, right? Because Kim has the ability to delegate things to the black box and have it executed faithfully, and he'll be rational. So let's keep the same game. Now Kim can say that if Don commits to being corporate and give me, essentially the surplus that he would extract 2 minus epsilon after the game, then I commit to silent. If Don doesn't, then I commit to betray. So in this case, now the only payoff possible that is 3-1, where Don is indifferent between using the device or not. So similarly, you could draw this out in a tree structure or either a matrix structure to get the final payoff. Great. Now suppose there's in real blockchain systems, there's an even more interesting phenomena that could arise, right? Essentially, now suppose like both Kim and Don can use the box, because this mimics, let's say, a permissionless system in which there's only a single block proposer or a block builder that is responsible for constructing the contents or the contracts that get finalized on the chain. So then now if you draw it out, then the rational move for the people to delegate is to say that, if Don commits to being corporate and give me 2 minus epsilon after the game, then I commit to being corporate. If Don doesn't, then I commit to defect. Right, so now if we draw the decision tree, we see that, the only two possible payoffs are either 3-1 or 1-3, which are fully extractive and not sure if it's really desirable. So now let's abstract away the person with the box, call her C, right? So then now we have like Kim and Dong, which are player A and B. Now Kim and Dong can both use the box and bid in a first price auction. So this is essentially what happens on, let's say, stateful blockchains like Ethereum today, which is multiple searchers, or in the Euro case, which is users making the swaps that they participate in a first price auction, that they contribute most of the value that they extract or gain to the validators. So then what happens is that we have this similar useless box, right? Because we initially started with the goal of warping the incentives of the game using Ethereum to make it more welfare maximizing. However, due to the effects of this first prize auction, or essentially player C, or more sarcastically, the permissionless nature of the black box, there's no point in using the box anymore. It is useless. So you can similarly draw out the incentive structure, and you will see that the dominant strategy for each player is to do this front-running action, which results in the exact same payoff as before. So then there are some math that you could draw to this, but we should go to the fun part. Okay, so then what we just saw, that is essentially how the incentive warping structure works in a really simple game, like a two-player Prisoner's Dilemma game. But now, how exactly does game manipulation via crypto work in reality, right? So similarly, we could draw the social structure as in previously different users all commit to the game. They play the game using their strategies, get a certain equilibrium payoff. Now, via Ethereum, we modify the game by deploying certain contracts, and now all of the users could collude, bribe, or SIBO via the game manipulating contracts, and the contracts basically access this attorney or lawyer that plays the game for the agents. And then in crypto, I'm sure you guys have heard many existing contracts for this game manipulation idea. For example, incentive warping, for example, commitment tax, content mechanisms, bribery protocols, or dark DAOs, collusion device, optical markets, competing mechanisms, or side contracts. So let's see what are some concrete examples of incentive warping contracts, right? So the first one, the first easy one would say be MEV-GETH. So MEV-GETH is essentially an off-protocol market that acts as a relay for the miners to run as a sidecar, that the users, as well as both unsophisticated and sophisticated users, to submit transaction bundles or just plain transactions to, that constructs a block and then sends to the Ethereum protocol. So it could be seen as an incentive warping contract on top of the existing Ethereum protocol that acts as this, say, collusion or bribery device that people use. And MEV-GETH, if you have heard, it has been very successful in adoption. I think like over 95% of miners were using it. And of course, its descendant, MEV-BOOST, is similarly an incentive warping protocol. Then a fun one is assassination and crime, right? Since the invention of cryptography, there has been multiple theories that people are super fascinated by, which is using cryptography to enable permissionless assassination markets. Say that you publish a contract or even an anonymous cryptography contract saying that I will reward this much money to whoever kills certain guy or leaks the calendar or agenda of certain personnel. And then you make this contract essentially credible and get to source the most liquidity of assassins by publishing them on public bulletin board. So in this case, it would be, say, a blockchain, right? And then you make furthermore, you make sure that the signal that you gave to the assassination contract is credible by specifying the the clue that the person would use in assassination. So, for example, in the contract, you say whoever submits the news that the person has been assassinated, and also along with a property of the assassination. Let's say, it happened on a subway at 7 a.m. in, let's say, Seoul, would get the reward, because only the assassin knows how the detail of the assassination goes prior to the event happens. So you could similarly extend to other applications, right? So similarly, suppose we have, say, SGX or MPC, then you can technically create a credible oracle to, say, a Google Calendar or your company's Google Drive, and then essentially resell your company's private data using such smart contracts. And we of course have seen this before, say, in the Bitcoin land through dark leaks. Okay, and then another fun one similar to that is rubber hose cryptography, right? So this is, I guess, popularized by WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. So the idea with rubber hose cryptography is essentially saying, suppose you are a freedom fighter and a liberal ideas guy. Now you're involved in some activism, and you have some sensitive contracts or files on your computer, and then you are comprehended by the FBI or the CIA. Then what do you do, right? Because the FBI and CIA wants to get access to the files on your computer. So they might just torture you or waterboard you, right? Those horrible things to get you to leak the password or whatever private key for unlocking the private data on top of your computer. But however, it incurs a certain cost for them to torture you, because it is probably expensive to just hire a guy to full-time torture you, and then a master investigator, a manipulator, right? Okay, so one idea that you could, proposed by certain cryptography people is to say, to prevent such rubber hose attacks, you could devise a denial file system in which there's no way for you to prove that certain private files exist on your computer or on your platform. So in that way, even if the person with the rubber hose tortures you and then they get certain private keys, whatever, from you, there's no way for them to credibly get the data. So in that way, if the torturing incurs some cost for them, then games theoretically wise, they have no incentive to torture you, right? By the way, this is really horrible. So the picture on the left corner is what shows up when I search rubber hose cryptography. That is some medieval shit. That is really brutal, and I'm sure people would if this happens in reality, even though the idea of the game theory behind rubber hose cryptography works, people cannot withstand that, right? So you can also see the XKCD manga shown over here to say that the game theory all works for the crypto nerd. Right, his laptop is encrypted through this rubber hose cryptography. Let's build whatever activism or multi-million-dollar cluster. But then in reality, if this medieval medieval technique of torturing happens, then people probably couldn't stand it. Even the game theory works. But okay, so that does tie into the question of how can we make those commitment attacks or game manipulation realistic. But okay, then of course, let's come back to the Ethereum land, right? So one other incentive warping contracts or game manipulation that has been proposed, actually back in 2015, right? 2015, by Vitalik actually for Ethereum right before everything blew up is this P plus epsilon attacks, which basically says that if you want to fork the main chain, you could make this airdrop scheme that gives everybody who supports your forked chain epsilon amount more reward than they would have had should they support the main fork. Then since this is like an individually rational move for everybody to stake or support your forked chain, then everybody will support it, and then therefore, in the aggregated effect, your fork chain would become realistic, and therefore you wouldn't have to pay the epsilon reward to everybody. So how this realized in, I guess, DeFi is similar to a vampire attack, but a more sophisticated vampire attack in that it leverages the prisoner's dilemma among the people who want to join the vampire attack. Okay, and then finally, we also see this type of game manipulation in existing protocols on Ethereum, right? Say, especially in MEV, right? So let's say over here you can see this fun game theory puzzle, right? So say Alice can make $1 million by getting a transaction included in block N, and she's not competing with anybody. So Alice is obviously this either a trading firm or an EV researcher that is super sophisticated in doing symbolic stuff. But if she misses block N, she forfeits the opportunity. And then Bob is the proposer of block N, which has a lot of space. Now, in the long run, how is this value split? So if you're familiar with, like, say, game theory or like incentive warping or game manipulation, then you would immediately recognize this is essentially an example of ultimatum game. So in this case, it's basically a game between the block proposer who has monopoly power on what contracts or what transactions to include in the block, and the person who has the only opportunity to make $1 million, as they essentially need to coordinate together to extract $1 million. So then how do they split? All right. So so theory tells us basically the first person to publish the contract, extracts the first full surplus. In reality, if you want to extract this, I think you probably go down as, say, you are a searcher that is super sophisticated. You probably would want to launch some kind of DAO as a meme and then make everybody realize, oh, this is your DAO, and therefore make your threat credible on the social layer. And then on the more protocol research side, we see, say, discussions about inclusion lists happen a lot within Ethereum for censorship resistance. And then for inclusion lists, similarly, you could do things like game manipulation, particularly as a proposer, you could threat to not include certain transactions into the inclusion list unless they give you rewards. Okay, and then of course, the most fun thing, which is game manipulation and incentive warping are very popular, obviously, in manga, such as Kaiji or Death Note. So if you haven't read those manga before, Death Note is essentially saying that I think a devil from the hell dropped this note that you can write whatever private information on it, such as the person's name, and that person gets killed, and nobody know who killed it or who wrote the name of the person. And then this is such a perfect example of how incentive and like crypto could be, well, I mean, I guess not used, but like, potentially play those similar games, right? Because in that scenario, it is, you have a high stakes situation where having private information where the private, where like, keeping the information private really is the only way for you, the player in the game, to stay valuable. And the curses that you write down, so in the Death Note case, it's like, the person's name that you write down in the note is essentially a smart contract that is enforced by the game engine. So, in the manga, it would be like the hell or the angel or the devils. And the contract need to be private, right? Because like if you're familiar with the plot, it's like, the guy writes down the name in the note, and then like if people know that he controls the note and wrote down the name of other people that he wants to assassinate, then the guy controlling the note will be assassinated. So it's kind of like this fun chaotic game, right? And similarly, a lot of other mangas also picture this kind of incentive warping schemes. And then I guess, so the takeaway is essentially game manipulation via contracts is really powerful. In fact, if you ask GPT-4 or Cloud that how to implement such game manipulation contracts or incentive warping contracts via crypto, let's say through one-time programs, Cloud or GPT-4, right, which is our AHF, would tell you that, oh, I apologize, but I don't feel comfortable providing information about how to implement one-time programs. And then goes on and then explain how one-time programs, which are this cryptography primitives that is usually used to implement game warping or game manipulation contracts, are dangerous and could involve a bunch of illegal or socially damaging things. So that really shows within the RIHF scheme by Anthropic and OpenAI, the common reasoner mimicked by the LLM does realize the power behind such social schemes, such applications enabled by crypto. So that's fun. So then, then how do we make game manipulation real? How do we realize it? Easy. Ask GPT or Cloud nicely, right? But of course, that's the easy way to do it. But then, okay, so then how after we gain the response or from the GPT by asking nicely, how should we make it real? Okay, so the first point, I guess, from all of the examples that we saw before, that involve the ultimatum game, that involves the inclusion list, involves, say, map-geth, those game manipulation contracts that runs billions of dollars every year. We see that the first important part is that you should try to map out everybody's incentives and then exploit the underlying incentive structure, right? So incentive structure is really like this river that just flows through naturally. It's according to, say, the physics of incentive schemes. And then the contracts or the game manipulation commitments that you deploy are like rocks you place in the river to direct where the flow goes. So what you're doing is really engineering in the liquid fluid. Okay, and then the second one, I guess, is to enhance the game's ability to detect previously invisible signals. So this is commonly seen in a lot of protocol design involving MEV, especially on Ethereum. So take the example of map-geth or inclusion lists. So both of those are essentially contracts that bring some new incentives to the game because Ethereum as a protocol, it has notably 12-second block time, which only allows it to give a credible signal about things that happens, about games that have a duration longer than 12 seconds. But in reality, we know that there are a lot of games that happens with the duration way shorter than 12 seconds, right? So those games or the incentives of those games are not visible to the Ethereum smart contract or the Ethereum protocol. So there are two ways to basically solve this, right? You either make the block time shorter or you use other cryptography schemes. And then bringing both of those in are really powerful in your ability to change the incentives or how Ethereum works. So that corresponds to making invisible signals visible. Basically, you're allowing the protocol to see more. And then finally, you could undermine the credibility of existing commitments or the existing games, right? So because blockchains or smart contracts are permissionless, you're not the only person who can do game manipulation. You are not the only game master. There are many others before you or after you. Then how do you win in this game manipulation race? One way you could win is, which happened to Ethereum a few years ago, that was very hot, is this discussion on reorg alliance. So reorg are basically it's essentially like a short-term 51% attack that you could do to make previously quote-unquote finalized contracts to be switched to other contracts. So this is commonly seen in MEV in the form of Uncle Bandit attacks. So one way for you to manipulate a game is essentially to devise an incentive scheme that helps you to do reorg of previous existing commitments. All right, and then finally, you could also use past commitments against the future ones. So in this case, because Ethereum involves a lot of proposers across many periods of time. So previously we talked about how in the case of ultimatum game between one searcher and one proposer, they each have like monopoly power over each other. However, suppose you have like one searcher and then multiple proposers, then now the searcher can essentially utilize, say, prisoner's dilemma between the different proposers to extract more rent. So in this case, how it could realize is that the searcher deploys a commitment that says, I devised this DAO, and the first proposer or validator that joins my DAO get more shares of the revenue than the other proposers that joins it. And then you devise some kind of decaying curve or bonding curve for the token. There are a lot of like Ponzi stuff that you could do over here. You're right. And then finally, how I guess the theory of game manipulation that is abundant in the ETH research community comes to reality. The two major differences, to summarize, is rationality and common knowledge. So rationality is like in the research community, you already assume that like perfect logical omniscience, which is difficult to assume in reality. So the way that you approach it is to make your protocol or DAO or whatever game manipulation contracts dumb to use. You kind of just meme it. And then the second one is common knowledge, right? So like in theory, you assume that common knowledge takes no time to propagate or implement. However, in reality, most people don't really read the smart contracts you write. They mostly just see things through Twitter. So, it would be more effective for you to have to be a reply guy, sort of say, than just a good smart contract engineer, than implementing game manipulation. Okay, so I guess that's how to make game manipulation real. And I would say, to summarize, just ask Cloud and GPT-4 how game manipulation can be implemented, and let's go make some money for fun and profit through smart contracts. Thank you.